Imagine standing at the edge of the vast Sahara Desert. The sun burns above you, the wind carries whispers of forgotten footsteps, and the sands stretch endlessly. Or picture the Indian Ocean at dawn, calm and beautiful, but once filled with ships bearing human cargo. These were not just terrains of nature, but highways of pain and endurance. For centuries, long before the transatlantic slave trade dominated global consciousness, the Trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean slave trades devastated Africa. They claimed millions of lives and reshaped entire societies, yet remain largely absent from mainstream history. Across these sands and seas, families were torn apart, civilizations shaken, and lives reduced to commodities. And though the world has changed, the silence around these trades persists. Today we shatter that silence. Today we honor those whose stories were buried under centuries of neglect. This is their story, resurrected and retold not as footnotes, but as the powerful centerpieces of our shared human history. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you will never look at history or the present the same way again. Why do we remember the transatlantic slave trade and yet forget the trade routes that came before and beside it? Why do school books skip the trails etched into the desert and the winds that carried dhows to distant lands? How can a system that lasted over 1,000 years and touched nearly every region of the African continent remain so obscured? These are the forgotten stories of the Trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean slave trades. Their erasure is not accidental. Today, we reclaim them. We dive deep into uncomfortable truths to expose what must be remembered, no matter how long it's been buried. The Trans-Saharan slave trade dates back to antiquity, intensifying during the Islamic expansion into North Africa in the 7th century. The Sahara was not a barrier, but a bridge. Camel caravans, sometimes stretching hundreds strong, traversed the desert, linking sub-Saharan Africa with North Africa and the Mediterranean world. Slavery was deeply embedded in the trade networks of empires like Ghana, Mali, Kanem-Bornu, and Songhai. Local African leaders, often incentivized by gifts or weapons, supplied captives to Arab traders. Some were war captives, others were kidnapped in raids. The journey across the desert was a trial by death. Temperatures soared above 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was scarce, and those who collapsed from exhaustion were often left behind. Survivors arrived at slave markets in oases like Takeda and Sijil Massa, or cities like Tripoli and Cairo. From there, enslaved Africans were taken into North Africa, the Levant, and Europe. They worked as domestic servants, concubines, laborers, and even eunuchs in royal courts. Some were conscripted into military service, including the feared Mamluks of Egypt, originally enslaved Turks and Africans trained as elite soldiers who would eventually seize power themselves. This trade, spanning more than a millennium, drained millions of people from the African interior and altered the cultural and demographic landscape of entire regions. To the east, another network flourished along the Swahili coast, connecting Africa with Arabia, Persia, India, and even Southeast Asia. This Indian Ocean trade began as early as the 1st century CE, but by the 9th century, it had become a full-scale system of economic and human exchange. Zanzibar, Kilwa, and Mombasa were among the prominent ports, where Arab and Persian traders met African intermediaries. African kingdoms in present-day Mozambique, Tanzania, and Kenya captured and sold people inland, sometimes traveling hundreds of kilometers to bring captives to the coast. Once sold, enslaved individuals were packed onto dhows, lightweight wooden ships with lateen sails. Unlike the Atlantic slave ships, which were massive and notorious for brutality, Indian Ocean vessels were smaller but still perilous. Journeys to Muscat, Basra, or Bombay could last weeks. Death by dehydration, starvation, or disease was common. In Oman, enslaved Africans worked on massive date plantations, toiling under the sun with no legal rights. In Persia, they served in homes, on farms, and as soldiers. In India, African women became wet nurses and household workers. Men could rise to positions of power in royal armies. such as the Habshi generals in the Deccan Sultanates. This trade was not only widespread, but enduring. It continued in some form into the early 20th century, long after the transatlantic trade had ended. Both trades were sustained by profit and power. Slavery was not an unfortunate consequence. It was the foundation of many regional economies. Slaves were exchanged for goods like spices from India, Chinese porcelain, Persian carpets, and Arabian horses. African ivory, gold, and slaves were highly coveted on the global stage. The wealth generated by these trades enriched coastal cities, funded empires, and maintained political alliances. Rulers in cities like Kilwa, Gao, and Cairo grew powerful from taxes and tributes connected to the slave trade. Merchants in Muscat or Baghdad depended on enslaved labor to run their plantations and workshops. For them, slavery was an institution as normal as agriculture. But for the enslaved, this economy meant permanent dislocation. They were torn from everything they knew and thrust into alien societies where they had to rebuild identity from scratch or die trying. Beyond numbers, beyond economic charts, lay the human toll. Families vanished. Children grew up never knowing their heritage. Entire villages became ghost towns after repeated raids. In East Africa, cultural memory of the Indian Ocean trade remains vivid, passed down through oral histories and Swahili poetry. Songs speak of longing, of sorrow, of hope. In the Sahel, griots still sing of the days when their ancestors vanished into the desert, never to return. Some enslaved Africans managed to build lives, even rise in status, but most did not. Their daily existence was marked by servitude, humiliation, and the constant ache of displacement. They weren't just laborers. They were mothers, sons, artisans, warriors, and storytellers, people whose lives mattered. Though history may have tried to forget them, their spirits endure. You can see it in the cultural traces left behind: Swahili architecture with Persian influences, African musical rhythms echoing in Arabian drums, and Afro-Indian communities in Gujarat and Hyderabad. Their endurance is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Despite enslavement, despite erasure, they resisted invisibility through culture, language, and memory. Let us honor their resilience. Let us ensure their voices are no longer buried. The legacy of the Trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean slave trades must be taught alongside the Atlantic trade, not as an afterthought, but as a parallel atrocity with equal weight. By remembering, we heal. By teaching, we protect. And by listening, we restore justice to those history tried to silence. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let the world hear what it was never meant to forget.